Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to have a really long, laid-back conversation with you about something that's been on my mind ever since it dropped. The brand new Ninja Gaiden Ragebound Update 1.0.1. If you've been following this game since launch, or even if you're just kind of on the fence about jumping into it, there's so much to unpack here. I figured instead of just giving you a quick rundown of the patch notes and calling it a day, we'd really take our time, talk through every single change, explore what it means for players, and just kind of vibe together as we walk through this whole update. So settle in because this is going to be a thorough breakdown. First off, I want to set the stage. Ninja Gaiden Ragebound is already one of those games that thrives on intensity. It's fast, it's punishing, and it demands precision. It's not the kind of game you can just casually mash buttons and expect to succeed. And that's what makes updates like 1.0.1 so fascinating, because every little tweak matters. The developers know their audience. They know the players who gravitate toward this franchise are here for that razor-sharp combat, the challenge, and the thrill of mastering something that initially feels impossible. So when they add new features, or even when they fix something as small as a camera angle, it can have a huge ripple effect on how the game feels moment to moment. One of the biggest additions in this update, and I think a lot of you are going to breathe a sigh of relief over this, is the restart from checkpoint option. If you've played Ragebound, you know exactly why this is such a huge quality of life improvement. Before, if you messed up near the end of a level, or if you wanted to retry a section because you weren't happy with your performance, you basically had to go all the way back to the beginning. And that might not sound so bad on paper, but when you've just slogged through a gauntlet of enemies, perfectly timed your jumps, and you slip on one tiny miscalculation right before the finish line, it can feel brutal to lose all that progress. With this new option, you can restart right from your last checkpoint instead of replaying everything from scratch. That's a game changer. It doesn't make the game easier per se. You still have to get through the hard parts, but it respects your time in a way that makes the difficulty feel a little more fair. It's almost like the devs are saying, okay, we know you're here for the challenge, but we don't want you to get burned out by repetition. Another cool tweak is how hard mode can now be unlocked early if you beat Ryu in the very first level. And honestly, this is such a clever design choice. For veteran players who grew up on Ninja Gaiden, beating that opening duel is almost like a rite of passage. It's a way for the game to say, all right, you clearly know what you're doing. Let's stop holding your hand and throw you straight into the deep end. For newer players, they can take their time with normal mode, build up their skills, and then graduate into hard later on. It's a perfect balance between accessibility and rewarding mastery, and I think it's going to make the game more fun for both groups. Speaking of accessibility, I really like that they added the option to turn off hit stop and screen shake. Now, if you don't know what hit stop is, that's the little pause or freeze frame you feel when your attack connects with an enemy. It's a classic technique in action games to add impact. It makes your hits feel weightier, but not everyone enjoys it. Some players find it disruptive or even physically uncomfortable. Same thing with screen shake. It can add drama, but if you're sensitive to motion, it can be a real pain, literally. By giving us the choice to toggle those features, the devs are basically acknowledging that one size doesn't fit all. It's a small change on paper, but for accessibility, it's massive. Now let's talk about the fun cosmetic stuff, because I know a bunch of you are completionists. Golden skins are now awarded as soon as you achieve an S rank on all levels. Before this patch, you had to actually beat the final level after earning those S ranks in order to unlock them. And I can't tell you how many people were frustrated by that, because if you're good enough to earn an S rank across the board, you've already proven your mastery. You shouldn't need to slog through that last level again just to get your reward. Now, the moment you nail that final S rank, boom, you've got the golden skins ready to flex. It's a nice little way to show off your skill, and I think it just feels more rewarding in the moment. The update also adds some new bits of story content, and this is the kind of thing I really appreciate. There are brand new dialogues at the start of levels S4, S5, and S6, plus an alternative dialogue portrait for the masked agent on level 4-4. Now, are these game-changing additions? Probably not, but what they do is flesh out the world and give fans more character context. If you're already invested in the lore of Ragebound, these little nuggets of story are like Easter eggs for you to uncover, and they add some extra depth to the overall narrative. And then we get into the technical side, which is where I think this patch really shines. On the Nintendo Switch specifically, performance has been noticeably improved. They even added an option to target 60 frames per second, which is a huge deal. I know some of you might say, well, the Switch isn't exactly known for being a powerhouse, and that's true. But when you're playing a game as fast and as precise as Ninja Gaiden, Smooth performance is everything. If you're on the Switch too, especially, this option really helps the game feel closer to how it was meant to be played. And let me tell you, once you've felt Ragebound running at a stable 60, it's tough to go back. Another neat touch is the new CRT filter. This one's a little more niche, but I think it's awesome. It gives the visuals that retro scan-lined look, which is such a nice nod to the series' roots. Ninja Gaiden has this long history going back to the NES days, and being able to recreate that vibe, even just for fun, feels like a love letter to longtime fans. I tried it out, and while I don't think I'll play the whole game with it on, I can definitely see myself turning it on when I'm feeling nostalgic or when I want to make my gameplay footage look extra retro for a video. Of course, no patch is complete without bug fixes, and 1.0.1 brings a bunch of them. One of the big ones was the kill requirement for level 3 to 2 in hard mode. Before, it was kind of unbalanced. You had to get a weirdly high number of kills to snag the top score, and it just didn't feel consistent with the rest of the game. That's been adjusted now, which means going for S ranks should feel more fair and more achievable, especially for people who were getting frustrated at that specific level. They also tackled some really annoying camera issues. There was this infamous bug where Kenji could climb a wall near the end of level 3 to 5 and just leave the camera behind. Suddenly, you're fighting off screen and nobody wants that. That's been fixed, thankfully. They also addressed some janky collisions with collapsing platforms and enemies, as well as situations where certain obstacles weren't behaving the way they should when you hit them with hypercharge. Again, this might sound like nitpicking if you haven't played the game, but when you're in the middle of a run and something doesn't work the way you expect, it can totally kill the flow. Fixes like this are the kind of invisible polish that make the game feel more solid overall. Boss fights also got some love. There were a few issues with hitboxes not lining up properly, or projectiles not being blocked when they should have been, and even some cutscene skip bugs that messed with the pacing. All of that has been smoothed out, so now when you're in the middle of a boss battle, it feels like you're actually fighting the boss and not the game's quirks. There are plenty of other smaller fixes tucked into this update too. Things like removing an invisible ceiling in level S6, making sure characters can't get stuck in weird spots or slip out of bounds, polishing up certain animations and transitions, and even adding better support for direct input controllers. Again, it's all about making the experience smoother, cleaner, and more reliable. Now, beyond the bullet points, what I really appreciate about this update is the philosophy behind it. The developers clearly listened to feedback. Players were saying, hey, we love the challenge, but the repetition is killing us. And boom, they added a checkpoint restart. Others were saying, the camera's janky, the hitboxes feel off, and the performance could be better. And the devs responded with fixes and optimizations. Accessibility has been a big conversation in gaming the past few years too, and they're listening there as well, giving us options like disabling screen shake and hit stop. That shows me they're not just focused on making the game harder or flashier, but actually making it more playable for everyone, which is huge. I also think this update sets the tone for what we can expect in the future. If this is just version 1.0.1, the very first update, then we might be in for some really exciting stuff down the line. Maybe we'll see even more story content, maybe new modes, maybe more cosmetic rewards. The fact that they're already adding quality of life improvements and listening to the community gives me confidence that Ragebound isn't just going to be a one-and-done release.